The cowboy's horse slowed as the sky burned orange across the canyon, casting long shadows over the rugged ground. He sensed something wrong before he saw it, a tension in the air that wasn't shaped by wind or wilderness. When he rounded the curve, he spotted two small figures crouched low behind a fallen tree. The girls were trembling, their dark braids dusty, their breaths sharp and uneven. One clutched the other like she was protecting a fragile heartbeat. The cowboy dismounted quietly, understanding that sudden movements could make fear explode. He lifted his hands gently, trying to show he meant no harm. The older girl looked ready to run, but exhaustion dragged her down. Her eyes, fierce but frightened, darted from the shadows to the cowboy as if weighing whether danger stood behind him or in front. He knelt slowly, meeting her gaze without force, letting her read the kind of man he was. A branch snapped somewhere behind the rocks, a sound too heavy to belong to animals. The girls flinched violently. The cowboy didn't hesitate. He motioned them toward his horse and gently guided them forward, feeling their fear trembling through their hands as they climbed onto the saddle without a word spoken. The horse sensed the tension instantly, snorting as the cowboy swung up behind them. He wrapped one arm protectively around both girls, and with a nudge, they pushed off across the open stretch. Dust rose behind them like a warning smothered by the gallop's urgency. As they rode into safer ground, the younger girl looked up at him with wide, guilt-heavy eyes, as if she feared she was burdening a stranger. He simply nodded, letting the gesture carry reassurance. Some rescues carried no need for speech, only steadiness where chaos once stood. By the time the canyon walls softened into rolling land, the girls' trembling eased, though exhaustion pulled at their shoulders. The cowboy slowed the horse, keeping alert with the instinct of a man who had learned survival from harsh terrain and harsher people. They reached a small camp he used on long rides. Smoke from the earlier cook fire still lingered. He helped the girls down, offering water first. The older one hesitated, studying him with a warrior's caution, then handed the cup to her sister before drinking herself, showing her protective nature ran deep. When the girls finally spoke, their voices were thin, as though words had been scraped by fear. They explained that strangers had chased them, outsiders who roamed the land with malicious intent. They had been gathering herbs when the men appeared, forcing them to flee deeper into the canyon's dangerous maze. The cowboy listened without interruption, leaning on the saddle horn, feeling the weight of the situation settle on his shoulders. He knew these lands well, but he also knew trouble traveled through them like wildfire, never predictable and always hungry for victims who couldn't fight back. He stirred the campfire back to life, its warmth cracking softly through the cooling dusk. The girls sat near it, their faces finally illuminated enough for him to see their exhaustion. The younger leaned against her sister, drifting in and out of rest, comforted only by shared breath and newfound safety. The cowboy stayed watchful, scanning the tree line, hearing the silent echoes of whatever had hunted them. He didn't know if those men had tracked their escape, but he wasn't naive enough to assume danger simply disappeared. Trouble often lingered like a scent after a storm. The older girl's voice broke the quiet, whispering her gratitude. Her tribe lived miles away, too far to reach before nightfall. She feared the men would search for them until the moon rose high. The cowboy assured her she was safe here, though his mind continued working through possibilities. Night crept softly over the camp, carrying cold air that settled like an unwelcome guest. He set a warm blanket around both girls, noticing how instinctively they curled together, relying on each other's strength. Their bond reminded him of times he, too, had survived only by trusting the right person. The firelight flickered across the canyon's edge, and the cowboy's eyes followed every shifting shadow. He knew he had stepped into something complicated, something that didn't belong to him yet now demanded his involvement. But the sight of those terrified faces made retreat impossible. The older girl revealed that their mother would be searching for them by now, a woman who carried fierce reputation across the land. The cowboy had heard stories about a skilled Apache healer and tracker who could find a trail even in wind-swept dust. He hoped those stories rang true tonight. As darkness deepened, the girls' exhaustion finally pulled them into fragile sleep. The cowboy sat near the fire, his hand resting on his rifle though he hoped never to use it. He watched over them with a quiet determination, feeling responsible for them in a way that surprised him. The night seemed endless, but he stayed awake, listening to the soft breathing of the children who trusted him without knowing his past. He had seen enough cruelty in the world to choose the side he stood on, even when the cost was high. Saving them felt like redemption he didn't ask for. When the first hint of moonlight touched the canyon, something shifted in the air. A distant call, soft but unmistakable, drifted toward them. The older girl stirred, eyes half open, whispering that the voice belonged to her mother. The cowboy felt his pulse quicken, wondering what dawn would bring. But beneath the relief, he sensed something else building, a new chapter that had been set into motion the moment he lifted them onto his horse. As he stared toward the dark horizon, he knew his life would not return to its simple rhythm after this night. The wind carried whispers of the approaching footsteps, light but confident. The girls woke fully, gripping each other with hope instead of fear. And the cowboy stood, adjusting his hat, preparing himself to face the woman who would arrive at sunrise with gratitude, questions, and something far more unexpected. The mist rolled across the camp like a slow-moving tide, softening the shapes of tents and dying embers. The cowboy rubbed the sleep from his eyes, unaware of how the day would unfold. The girls sat near the fire, wrapped in blankets, glancing every few seconds toward the tree line as if expecting something. The first sign was silence, too complete, too unnatural. Birds that usually stirred at dawn had fallen quiet. Even the horses shifted uneasily. The cowboy stood, scanning the dim horizon, his hand instinctively near his holster though he hoped he wouldn't need it today. A silhouette emerged from the fog, tall and graceful but unmistakably dangerous. She walked with a slow, commanding stride, each step deliberate. Her carved staff tapped against stones, echoing like a warning. The girls gasped, dropping their blankets, and ran toward the approaching figure before the cowboy could react. The woman knelt, allowing the girls to press their faces into her waist. Her hands were steady as she touched their hair, checking for injuries, whispering something soft yet stern. Only after reassuring herself they were truly unharmed did she lift her gaze toward the cowboy, her expression unreadable, almost unsettling. Her eyes held the sharpness of someone who had witnessed more loss than comfort. She stood still for several heartbeats, measuring the cowboy with a quiet that made him shift uneasily. His instincts told him she was not here simply to say thanks, but also not to accuse. Something deeper simmered between those possibilities. When she finally approached, the staff in her hand glimmered with carved symbols. The girls remained behind her, gripping her clothing as though she were their anchor to the world. Her voice, when it came, was low and steady, carrying the weight of both gratitude and judgment intertwined. "You saved what is most precious to me," she said, her words slow, each syllable carefully chosen. "And such deeds must be repaid." The cowboy opened his mouth to say it wasn't necessary, that anyone would have helped, but she raised a hand, silencing him without force, only authority. He realized then she was no ordinary tribeswoman, she held a position of respect or power. Her presence alone shifted the energy of the camp. Even the horses bowed their heads slightly, sensing that something larger than gratitude or debt was at play. The cowboy felt the weight of a new responsibility settling on him. The girls whispered to her, their tiny voices urgent. The mother listened carefully, her eyes tightening as they described what had chased them. Fear hardened into anger, then softened into relief when they mentioned how the cowboy had shielded them. She turned back toward him, her posture straightening with new resolve. "You carried them through danger you did not create," she continued. "And you stayed with them through the night." Her tone softened but only slightly. "Such loyalty is rare among your kind." The cowboy felt heat rise in his face, unsure whether to feel honored or embarrassed by her blunt honesty. She stepped closer until only a few feet separated them. The fog swirled around her figure like a cloak. The cowboy met her gaze and held it, surprised by the quiet intensity there, not hostility, but a deep, piercing evaluation, as if she could see straight through his intentions and find the truth beneath. "You risked misunderstanding," she said, voice lowering. "Risked blame. Risked danger. Most would not have intervened." Her staff touched the dirt between them, marking the boundary of what would happen next. "When a man protects children not his own, my people believe that the spirits watch his choices with care." The cowboy swallowed, wishing she wouldn't look at him like he had done something extraordinary. He wanted to tell her he hadn't thought, he had acted because fear in a child's eyes was something he could never ignore. But every word he prepared felt small, insufficient beside her solemn recognition. The girls tugged at her clothing, murmuring again. She nodded slowly, then motioned for the cowboy to kneel. He hesitated, glancing around the camp as if hoping for guidance. None came. Her expression didn't change, but the air around her seemed to insist. He lowered himself, resting one knee on the ground. She placed her hand lightly on his shoulder, her fingers warm and steady. The girls watched silently, their expressions a mixture of admiration and relief. The mother closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply, as though drawing strength from something unseen. The cowboy felt a strange calm settle over him. Then she spoke softly, words that sounded both blessing and promise. "You have stepped into a path with no turning back," she murmured. "Those who hunted my daughters will not forget what you did. They will return, and they will seek answers. When they come, you will not face them alone." Her hand lifted, and she gestured toward the canyon behind her. From the shadows, several Apache warriors stepped forward. Their faces were stern, but their weapons remained lowered. They were not there to challenge him but to acknowledge him. Each one nodded, silent but respectful. The cowboy felt the weight of the moment deepen. Whatever reward he'd expected, a simple thank you, maybe safe passage, was nowhere close to what she intended. This was not repayment, this was alliance, something far more binding and dangerous than money or gifts. His life had just changed, whether he welcomed it or not. The mother signaled to one of the warriors, who stepped forward with a small bundle wrapped in patterned cloth. He offered it to her with both hands, bowing his head. She took it and turned to the cowboy, holding the bundle between them like an oath. Her expression remained unreadable. "This is the beginning of your repayment," she said. "Not the end." She extended the bundle slowly. "Inside is a token of protection. Carry it, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that the girls you saved now walk under your shadow as you walk under ours." He accepted it hesitantly, fingers brushing the woven fabric. It felt unexpectedly heavy, like a weight meant to shape destiny rather than adorn it. When he looked up again, the mother's eyes softened, just barely. "You did not save them to earn reward," she said. "That is why the reward must be given." The girls hugged him unexpectedly, their small arms wrapping around his arm and waist. Their trust struck him harder than any thanks. He knelt again to meet their height, feeling their trembling ease into something warm and grateful. He realized then that he had become part of their story. When he stood, the mother stepped back, her staff tapping against the earth once more. "Danger is not finished," she warned. "But now, neither are you." She turned toward the canyon, guiding her daughters. The warriors followed in quiet formation, but one paused long enough to give the cowboy a final nod. As the mist swallowed them, the cowboy looked down at the bundle in his hands. Something inside pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat or a promise. The camp remained silent, but not with fear, more like awe. The cowboy finally understood that he had not just saved 2 lives, he had stepped into a world he barely knew. He breathed slowly, ready for whatever came next, knowing dawn had brought more than a mother's gratitude. It had brought a future woven with danger, loyalty, and a destiny he had not chosen but could no longer refuse. The wrapped deer hide felt unexpectedly warm in his hands as the morning breeze curled through the canyon, carrying traces of smoke and sage. The cowboy met the woman's steady gaze, sensing she offered far more than a simple token. The 2 girls stood close beside her, their relief finally easing into safety. He closer around her shoulders. For a moment, the scene looked peaceful. But peace never lasts long in a cabin hiding fugitives. "They aren't far behind," the youngest said, finally breaking her silence. Her voice was low, roughened by the cold and the chase. She spoke in English, but the cadence carried the rhythm of her people's tongue. "They track like wolves. They won't stop because of the rain." She stepped to the window, peering out into the dark. "They're already on our trail." My jaw tightened. I had spent 10 years avoiding trouble. Yet here trouble stood in my cabin wearing soaked blankets and carrying secrets that could kill all of us by dawn. The middle woman stopped tending the fire and faced me fully. Her eyes were calm where the youngest's were sharp. "We didn't come to bring death to your door," she said quietly. "We had no choice." The elder touched her arm gently, signaling she would speak next. When she lifted her gaze to mine, something old and powerful moved behind her eyes, something that had seen more storms than any of us combined. "They seek what we protect," she said. "A truth they fear, and a truth they want to destroy." She glanced toward the door, as if the truth itself might be standing outside. We ran because staying meant dying. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the world in a flash of white. For a heartbeat, I saw the reflection of fear in the window, 3 shapes huddled near the fire,
one man standing guard with nothing but a rusty rifle and an empty life he'd spent pretending nothing could reach him anymore. But something had reached me. It had come knocking, soaked and desperate in the middle of a storm. "I don't know who you're running from," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "but no one gets through that storm tonight. You can rest. Warm yourselves. At dawn, we'll figure out what comes next." It wasn't heroism. It wasn't courage. It was instinct, the part of a man that wakes up when danger comes to people who don't deserve it. The elder closed her eyes briefly, as if my words offered a momentary reprieve from the dread inside her. The middle woman's shoulders dropped slightly, releasing some of the tension she'd been holding. But the youngest did not relax. She kept staring out into the dark, lips pressed thin, jaw tight. She didn't believe in rest. She didn't believe in safety. Not yet. The fire crackled, filling the silence with a soft hiss. I moved to stoke it, adding 2 more logs. Warmth spread slowly through the cabin, chasing the cold from the air. Outside, the wind roared like something alive, shaking the shutters and rattling the porch boards. The storm was growing stronger, angrier. It felt like the land itself was warning us. The middle woman handed the elder a carved wooden charm, something worn smooth by years of prayer or protection. The elder closed her fingers around it, whispering words I didn't recognize. It wasn't fear in her voice, it was resolve. Whatever they were,